At my retirement party, my replacement stood in the middle of the room and laughed. Finally, the company can shed its dead weight. The room erupted in laughter. I just smiled, shook his hand, and walked out. Monday morning, he discovered every single client had followed me to my new firm. But to understand how I turned public humiliation into the perfect revenge, I need to tell you about the moment everything started to crack. My name is Claire Donovan, and for 20 years, I built my reputation as the most trusted senior financial advisor at Westlake and Rowe Capital. At 48, I'd managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions, guided CEOs through hostile takeovers, and saved more family fortunes than I could count. So when the firm threw me a retirement party on the 30th floor of our Manhattan headquarters, I expected gratitude, maybe even genuine appreciation. The conference room sparkled with gold banners reading, "Happy Retirement, Claire." Someone had dug up an old photo from my first day at the firm, young, eager, ridiculously hopeful, and plastered it on a cake large enough to feed a small army. Champagne flowed, colleagues mingled, and for a brief moment, I almost believed this was sincere. Then Dylan Mercer stood up, 33 years old, Harvard MBA still fresh enough to smell the entitlement, designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The board had handpicked him as my replacement 3 months ago. I'd been instructed to mentor him, which translated to, teach this arrogant child everything you know so we can push you out smoothly. "I'd like to say a few words," Dylan announced, tapping his champagne flute with a gold pen. The room quieted. "We're here to celebrate Claire's departure." He paused, letting that word hang. "You know, in business, we talk about efficiency, about streamlining operations. Sometimes that means recognizing when it's time to cut away the dead weight." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. I kept my expression neutral, taking a slow sip of champagne. "Claire represents the old way of doing things," he continued, gaining confidence from the audience's attention. "Handwritten notes, face-to-face meetings, all that vintage charm. But Westlake and Rowe is moving into the future. We need fresh blood, innovative strategies, not someone still stuck in the last century." The room had gone silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I scanned the faces around me, colleagues I'd helped get promoted, junior advisors I'd mentored through their first big deals, partners whose marriages I'd saved by managing their assets during messy divorces. They all stood there, some smirking, others looking away, but not one speaking up. Dylan raised his glass. "So here's to clearing out the old to make room for the new. Finally, the company can shed its dead weight and soar." That's when the laughter came. Not from everyone, but from enough people to matter. People whose careers existed because I'd gone to bat for them. People who'd cried in my office during the 2008 crash when I'd saved their clients from total ruin. I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. Every eye turned to me, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the dramatic exit. Instead, I walked over to Dylan, my heels clicking against the marble floor in the silence. "Thank you, Dylan," I said, extending my hand. That was illuminating. He shook it, his grip attempting to be crushing. I matched it pound for pound, feeling his surprise. "Enjoy the clients," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "All 3 days of them." His brow furrowed in confusion, but I'd already turned away, walking toward the door. Behind me, someone started an awkward slow clap that died after 3 beats. As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished steel, composed, dignified, with just the hint of a smile. They thought they were watching a retirement. They were actually watching the first move in a chess game they didn't even know had started. I memorized every face that had laughed. Every single one would be receiving a very special email come Monday morning. But first, I had a story to tell them about their golden boy Dylan and my dear husband Ethan. A story that would make this retirement party look like a casual Tuesday. The elevator descended, and I pulled out my phone, opening the folder labeled Insurance. 20 years of relationships, 20 years of secrets, 20 years of being everyone's trusted advisor. They called me dead weight. They were about to learn that when you cut the anchor loose, sometimes the whole ship goes down with it. 2 weeks before that retirement party, I was still fighting to believe my life was intact. The dishwasher in our Tribeca apartment had been leaking for days, and I'd finally called someone to fix it. Such a mundane problem. Yet it would crack open everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The repairman, a chatty guy named Tony, needed to access the water line behind Ethan's filing cabinet in his home office. "Just need to slide this over a few inches." "Ma'am," he said, already pulling at the heavy oak piece my husband treated like Fort Knox. "Let me help," I offered, grabbing one end. As we shifted it, a manila envelope fell from behind, landing face up on the Persian rug. The handwriting stopped me cold. Feminine, looping, addressing my husband in purple ink. Not business correspondence. Ethan's law practice used digital everything. This was personal. "I'll just be a minute with this valve," Tony said, oblivious to my world tilting. I picked up the envelope. Inside were 3 handwritten letters, dated over the past 4 months. The sender, Madeline Carter, the 28-year-old secretary from Westlake and Rose Legal Department. As I read, my hands began to shake. "My darling Ethan, last night was incredible. I can barely concentrate at work knowing you're just a few floors away. Dylan says Claire's retirement is almost finalized. Soon we won't have to hide anymore. Dylan." The name jumped off the page like a slap. I kept reading. "It's funny how Dylan and I being cousins worked out so perfectly. He gets your wife's position, and I get you. He jokes that we're quite the team, him handling the professional side while I handle the personal. Once Claire is out of the picture at Westlake and Rowe, everything changes. No more sneaking around, no more pretending." The next letter was worse. Details about their encounters during Ethan's supposed client dinners. The weekend he'd claimed to be at a legal conference in Boston. They'd been in the Hamptons. The nights he'd worked late preparing for trials that, I now realized, had ended weeks earlier. But the third letter delivered the killing blow. "Dylan told me about the board meeting yesterday. They're going to make Claire's retirement seem like her idea. But he's been planting seeds for months about her outdated methods and declining performance. Your suggestion about the cognitive evaluation was brilliant, even though they didn't use it. It added to the narrative. By the time they announce Dylan as her replacement, everyone will think it's overdue. My husband had been strategizing my professional demise while sleeping with a woman young enough to be our daughter. A woman who happened to be the cousin of my replacement. All fixed," Tony announced, sliding the cabinet back into place. I shoved the letters into my purse, paid him, and waited for the apartment door to close before I collapsed onto Ethan's leather chair. 23 years of marriage. We'd built our careers together, supported each other through everything. When I'd made senior advisor, he'd thrown me a party. When he'd made partner at his firm, I'd surprised him with a week in Italy. We were the power couple everyone envied at charity galas and industry events. I walked to his computer, my fingers steady despite the rage building in my chest. His password hadn't changed, still our anniversary date. How's that for irony? The emails confirmed everything and more. Chains between Ethan and Dylan discussing the transition. Dylan asking for inside information about my clients, their weak points, their preferences. Ethan delivering it all like he was trading baseball cards. There were strategically timed complaints to HR about my difficult personality that Ethan had helped word to sound concerned rather than vindictive. The receipts told their own story. Hotel charges on days he'd claimed to be in court, jewelry purchases that never made it to me, restaurant bills for 2 at places I'd suggested we try together, him always too busy to go. I photographed everything, printed the most damning emails. The letters went into my scanner, creating perfect digital copies. Every piece of evidence went into a safety deposit box at a bank Ethan didn't even know I used. Then I sat back in his chair, staring at our wedding photo on his desk. We looked so young, so confident we'd conquered the world together. Now I understood. While I'd been building our empire, he'd been planning its demolition. But Ethan had made one crucial mistake. He'd forgotten that I knew where all the bodies were buried in the city's financial world. And Dylan? That arrogant child had no idea that the dead weight he was so eager to cut had enough connections to sink his career before it even started. I placed the photo face down and smiled. They wanted me gone? Fine. But I wouldn't be leaving alone. The next few days became an archaeological dig through the ruins of my marriage. Every evening, while Ethan attended his client dinners or partnership meetings, I excavated the truth from his meticulously organized life. His home office password manager was a goldmine. He'd saved everything, probably out of sheer laziness. Email accounts, credit card logins, even a separate cloud storage he thought he'd hidden. Men always underestimate their wives' technical abilities, especially men who still print out emails to read them. The full picture emerged like a photograph in developer fluid, each detail sharper and more damning than the last. 6 months of emails between Ethan and Dylan, starting just after Dylan was hired. The subject lines were innocuous: quarterly review thoughts or transition planning. But the content was pure conspiracy. Dylan would share my daily schedule, which clients I was meeting, what deals I was working on. Ethan would respond with insights. Claire always struggles with the Pemberton account in Q3. Or, she's been complaining about the new compliance requirements. Use that. Then there were the emails to Madeline. Hundreds of them, ranging from explicit to nauseating declarations of love. He'd written poetry. Ethan, who'd forgotten our last 3 anniversaries, had written actual poetry for his 28-year-old mistress. One particularly memorable line: "Your youth revives what Claire's ambition killed." I screenshot that one twice, just for the satisfaction. The credit card statements revealed the affair's geography. The Ritz-Carlton, always, room 1247. La Bernardin. Table, 42 by the window. Cartier, where he'd bought her a tennis bracelet using our joint investment returns. He'd even used our airline miles for their Vegas weekend, the weekend he'd supposedly been at a legal symposium in Delaware. Who lies about going to Delaware? But the real discovery came from his calendar sync with Madeline's. They'd been sloppy, using a shared Google Calendar labeled Project Sunshine. Every rendezvous, every lunch, every stolen afternoon, all meticulously scheduled with 15-minute buffers for transit time. The most recent entry, for next Monday, read: "Celebration dinner. The bitch is finally gone." I printed everything. The conference room printer at Westlake and Row hummed for 2 hours after everyone left, producing neat stacks of evidence that I organized into folders with color-coded tabs. Blue for financial fraud, yes. Ethan had been billing some of their hotel stays to his firm as client expenses. Red for the affair timeline. Green for the conspiracy to oust me. Yellow for Dylan's involvement, including a particularly interesting email where he promised Ethan a finder's fee for any clients he could convince to stay after my departure. The security guard, Sam, walked by during hour 2 of printing. "Working late again, Ms. Donovan?" "Just wrapping up some loose ends before retirement, Sam." He glanced at the papers. "That's a lot of loose ends." 20 years worth, I said, feeding another ream into the printer. By 3 a.m., I had everything. 12 bankers' boxes of printed evidence, plus encrypted digital copies on 3 separate flash drives. One for my lawyer, one for the safety deposit box, one hidden in my mother's apartment in Queens. The one property Ethan didn't know about because I'd bought it before we married and never added his name. The coup de grace came from Ethan's draft folder. He'd been composing an email to my biggest client, Richard Pemberton, CEO of Pemberton Industries. The draft, dated for the Monday after my retirement, suggested that with my declining mental acuity and emotional instability, Richard should consider Dylan for his portfolio management. Ethan offered to provide legal documentation of my concerning behavior if needed. Mental acuity, emotional instability, legal documentation. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was prepared to destroy my professional reputation entirely, to paint me as senile and unstable, all to ensure his cousin-connected mistress's boyfriend got my job and my clients. I sat in the dark office, surrounded by boxes of betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: absolute clarity. They'd made one fatal error in their elaborate scheme. They'd assumed I'd go quietly, perhaps grateful for the retirement package, too proud or too tired to fight back. They'd assumed the old ways I supposedly represented: relationship building, personal loyalty, trust earned over decades, were weaknesses. They were about to learn those relationships were weapons. Every client I'd saved from bankruptcy, every board member whose divorce I'd navigated, every CEO whose children I'd helped get into Ivy League schools, they all owed me. And in the financial world, debts always come due. I locked the boxes in an empty office on the abandoned 28th floor, the one being renovated. Nobody would look there before Monday. Then I went home, slipped into bed beside my snoring husband, and began planning the most spectacular professional murder-suicide Wall Street had ever seen. Ethan stirred, mumbled, "Working late again." "Just preparing for retirement," I whispered back. "It's going to be unforgettable." The beauty of revenge lies in the preparation. While Ethan and Dylan celebrated their premature victory, I spent the next week building my new empire in plain sight. First, the legal framework. I incorporated Donovan Strategic Advisory LLC on Tuesday morning, using a lawyer from a competing firm who owed me for saving his ass during the 2008 crash. "Fast and quiet, Marcus," I told him. "Can you do that? After what you did for me, I could file these papers in my sleep and nobody would know." Within 48 hours, I had an EIN, a business checking account, and corporate insurance, everything above board, everything legitimate. The office space came next. Harborview Business Plaza, a gleaming tower 6 blocks from Westlake and Row, close enough to be convenient for clients, far enough to be a deliberate insult. I signed a 3-year lease on the 17th floor, corner suite, panoramic views of the harbor. And most importantly, visible from Dylan's new office with a good pair of binoculars. "Moving fast for someone who's retiring," the leasing agent commented, eyeing my Westlake and Row business card. "Retirement is just another word for new beginning," I replied, signing the check for first, last, and security deposit from my personal account, the one Ethan didn't monitor. While furniture arrived at my new office, I maintained perfect composure at the old one. I even helped Dylan transition, handing over my files with detailed notes, introducing him to support staff, walking him through the quirks of each major account. He mistook my thoroughness for defeat. "I appreciate you being so professional about this," he said Thursday afternoon. Feet already up on my desk. Some people would be bitter. "Oh, Dylan," I smiled, handing him the Pemberton Industries folder. "I save my energy for things that matter." The most delicate part was the client list. 20 years of relationship building had given me something no corporate database could capture: personal cell phone numbers, private emails, home addresses. The real information lived in my memory and my personal notebook, the leather-bound one I'd carried since day one, now safely locked in my new office. Richard Pemberton's wife's birthday, March 15th. She loved orchids. Janet Morrison's son struggled with dyslexia. I'd connected them with the best specialist in Manhattan. David Chang's father had dementia. I'd helped them find the nursing home where he now lived comfortably. The Hendersons' daughter had her heart broken by that Fortune 500 CFO. I'd made sure his wife found out about all his affairs. These weren't just clients. They were people whose lives I'd touched, whose secrets I'd kept, whose trust I'd earned through 2 decades of 3 a.m. phone calls and weekend crisis management. Dylan had their portfolios. I had their loyalty. Friday morning, I set up my new email domain, Donovan Strategic.com. The website went live that afternoon, clean, professional, with a simple message: 20 years of trust, a lifetime of commitment, coming Monday. "What's that supposed to mean?" my assistant Kelly asked, looking over my shoulder at the screen. Kelly, who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times despite my recommendations, who'd watched younger, less qualified men leap over her on the corporate ladder. It means I'm not really retiring, I said quietly. And if you're interested, I'll need an operations director at my new firm. Same clients, better culture, and a 50% raise. Her eyes widened. Are you serious? Dead serious, but keep it quiet until Monday. Can you do that? She nodded, then paused. Is this why Dylan's been acting like he won the lottery? Dylan's about to learn the difference between winning the lottery and keeping the money. That evening, I prepared my final weapon, personalized emails to each of my 237 active clients. Not a mass mailing, not a form letter. Individual messages crafted with 20 years of knowledge, each one containing a subtle reminder of our history, a gentle touch of the personal connection we'd built. To Richard Pemberton. Remember when we navigated the hostile takeover in '09? You said you'd never trust another advisor with your family's future. I'm not really retiring, Richard, just changing venues. To Janet Morrison. How's Connor doing at Columbia? I still have that specialist number if he needs help with his thesis. By the way, I'll be continuing my practice independently. Same dedication, new address. Each email sat in my draft folder, scheduled to send at 6 a.m. Monday morning. But there was one more thing to add, the ammunition that would guarantee Dylan's complete destruction. I opened the folder labeled Project Sunshine and began attaching very specific documents to very specific emails. Not everyone would get the full story. That would be crass. But the right people would receive just enough information to ask the right questions. The managing partner who prided himself on ethical leadership would wonder why his senior associate was billing personal hotels to client accounts. The board members would question the coordination between Dylan and Ethan, and everyone would see the timeline that proved my retirement was orchestrated, not offered. By Sunday night, my new office was ready. I stood in the empty space, looking out at the city lights, my phone buzzing with texts from Kelly about the IT setup she'd secretly arranged. Tomorrow. They'd throw me a retirement party. Tomorrow. Dylan would publicly humiliate me. Tomorrow. Ethan would watch his mistress's cousin destroy his wife's career. And Monday morning, I'd return the favor. The retirement party played out exactly as I'd predicted. Dylan's speech, the laughter, the handshake. All of it unfolded like a rehearsed play where everyone knew their lines except me. Except I knew them better than anyone. As I walked through that room of traitors and cowards, I made my final mental notes. Jennifer from Fixed Income. Who'd laughed the loudest? Her husband didn't know about her gambling problem that I'd helped her hide from the partnership review. Tom from Wealth Management, smirking by the champagne, I'd covered for his SEC violation 2 years ago. Even Margaret from HR, nodding along to Dylan's speech, she'd forgotten I knew about her son's expunged drug arrest that I'd helped lawyer away. They'd all receive special versions of Monday's email. Leaving so soon? Ethan appeared at the elevator, playing the concerned husband. His cologne was different, Madeline's choice, no doubt. I thought we'd ride home together. I have a stop to make, I said, stepping into the elevator. Don't wait up. His face flickered with something, relief. He was probably texting her already. I watched the floors count down and made my final addition to his Monday morning surprise. Instead of going home, I returned to my new office. Kelly was there, having spent the weekend setting up systems under the guise of helping her sick mother. 3 other assistants from Westlake and Rowe were with her, all women who'd been passed over, underpaid, or overlooked. Is this really happening? Asked Sandra from research, whose work Dylan had been claiming as his own for months. It's happening, I confirmed, pulling up my email drafts. But what happens next depends on timing. I showed them the emails, scrolling through the personalized messages. These go out at 6 a.m. By 6:15, I expect the first calls. By 7, panic. By 8, exodus. What about the partners? Kelly asked. Won't they try to stop it? I smiled and pulled up a special folder. Let me show you what the partners will be dealing with Monday morning. The screenshots told the story. Ethan's fraudulent billing, Dylan's emails about eliminating the dead weight, Madeline's confession about her cousin getting her the job specifically to position Dylan. But the masterpiece was a recorded phone call, legal in New York as long as one party consents, between Dylan and Ethan from a week ago. Once Claire's out, we can restructure the entire wealth management division. Dylan's voice filled the room. Madeline says you've got documentation that could paint her as unstable, if needed. Divorce proceedings will be easier if she's seen as mentally compromised, Ethan replied. A forced retirement for cognitive decline would support that narrative. The assistant sat in stunned silence. They plan to destroy you completely, Sandra whispered. Yes, I said, closing the laptop. So I'm returning the favor. But I need to know you're all prepared for Monday. Once this starts, there's no stopping it. One by one. They nodded. These women had suffered their own indignities, watched their own careers stifled by men like Dylan. They weren't just helping me, they were striking their own blows. I made one final addition to the Monday morning emails. Along with the personalized messages and selective evidence, I included a simple attachment for Westlake and Rowe's biggest clients, a photo from tonight's party. Dylan at the podium, mid-speech, the banner, Happy Retirement Claire, visible behind him, and in the foreground, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, Ethan and Madeline's hands intertwined under a table, her engagement ring clearly visible. A ring that, according to the receipt I'd found, my husband had purchased with our joint investment account. Wait, Kelly said, zooming in on the photo. When did you take this? I didn't. I smiled. Sam the security guard did. Turns out he's been documenting their little displays of affection for months. He thought someone should know. And the engagement ring. Purchased last Tuesday, the same day Dylan formally accepted my position. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. I looked at my watch, 11:47 p.m. In 6 hours and 13 minutes, the emails would deploy. Each one a precision strike, together forming a carpet bombing that would level Dylan's career and Ethan's reputation. Go home, I told the women. Get some sleep. Monday will be busy. As they left, Kelly lingered. Claire, what about Mr. Donovan? He's still your husband. I thought about the 23 years, the shared dreams, the promises we'd made. Then I thought about the bitch is finally gone calendar entry. By Monday afternoon, he'll be my ex-husband. I've already had the papers drawn up. He'll sign them. How can you be sure? I held up a flash drive. Because the alternative is, I send this to the New York State Bar Association. Fraud, conspiracy, ethics violations. He'll be disbarred before lunch. Kelly whistled low. Remind me never to cross you. You wouldn't, I said, shutting down my computer. You have integrity. That's why you're here and they're not. As I locked the office, I took one last look at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Dylan was probably celebrating. Ethan was with Madeline, and the partners at Westlake and Rowe were sleeping soundly, confident in their Monday morning victory. In 6 hours, their world would implode, and I'd have a front row seat to watch it burn. Monday morning arrived like Christmas, and Judgment Day rolled into one. At 6 a.m. sharp, 237 emails left my outbox. By 6:07, my phone started ringing. Richard Pemberton was first. Claire, I'm looking at a photograph that's rather disturbing. Your husband and that young woman from legal. Madeline Carter, Dylan's cousin and Ethan's fiancée, apparently. His what? Richard's voice jumped an octave. While you're still married. The ring was purchased last Tuesday, the same day Dylan officially got my position. Jesus Christ, and this email about billing irregularities? Check page 3 of the attachment. Ethan billed your company $47,000 in false legal consultations that were actually his hotel stays with her. The line went silent, except for heavy breathing. Then, where's your new office? By 6:30, my phone was a symphony of notifications, texts, calls, emails, all from clients expressing various degrees of shock, outrage, and loyalty. Janet Morrison's was my favorite. That little shit called me Friday to say you were mentally declining. I'm pulling everything. Where do I sign with you? At 7:15, the first call came from Westlake and Rowe. Not from Dylan, from the managing partner, William Westlake himself. Claire, what have you done? I've retired, Bill. You were at my party, remember? You know what I mean. These emails, the accusations. Everything is documented. Would you like me to forward you the full file? It's about 300 pages, including Dylan and Ethan's conspiracy to force me out and damage my reputation. That's not, we never. Bill, I have a recording of Dylan saying you personally approved the cognitive decline narrative. Should I add that to the SEC complaint I'm filing this afternoon? He hung up. By 8 a.m., Westlake and Rowe was in full crisis mode. Kelly, now officially my operations director, was feeding me real-time intelligence from contacts still inside. Conference room A is full of partners screaming at each other, she reported. Dylan never showed up. Security found his desk already cleaned out. He ran. Like a rat from a sinking ship. But here's the beautiful part. Madeline's in the lobby, crying, demanding to know where he went. Apparently, he left her a note saying the engagement was off and he was taking a position in London. I couldn't help but laugh. He abandoned her, after everything? Gets better. Ethan just arrived and saw her in the lobby. They're having a massive fight in front of everyone. She's screaming about the ring, how he promised to leave you, how Dylan used them both. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Ethan's attorney just called. He'll sign whatever divorce papers you want. Full surrender. At 9 a.m., the exodus began. Richard Pemberton's withdrawal was first. $87 million gone in a single transfer. Then Janet Morrison. Then the Hendersons. By noon, Westlake and Rowe had lost 40% of their managed assets. The financial press caught wind by lunch. Mass exodus at Westlake and Rowe ran across Bloomberg terminals. My phone rang with reporters wanting statements. I gave them nothing. The emails and evidence were speaking for themselves. At 2:01 p.m., I sat in my new corner office, watching the harbor while Kelly coordinated the incoming asset transfers. The door burst open. Ethan, disheveled, tie askew, looking like he'd aged 5 years since Friday. You destroyed everything, he gasped. No, Ethan. You destroyed everything. I just documented it. My partnership is gone. The Bar Association is investigating. Madeline won't even answer my calls. The 28-year-old you were leaving me for won't return your calls? How tragic. He collapsed into a chair. How did you know? The dishwasher leaked. I pulled out the original letters. Your filing cabinet had to be moved. Madeline's love letters fell out. Everything else unraveled from there. His face went white. Those were hidden. Not well enough, just like the hotel charges, the fake billing, the conspiracy with Dylan. You got sloppy. Ethan, both of you thought I was too old, too tired, too dead weight to notice. What do you want? The divorce papers are with your lawyer. Sign them. Take your clothes and get out of the apartment. Don't contact me again. That's it. Unless you'd prefer I forward the full fraud file to the district attorney. He stood up slowly, looking around my office, the view, the furniture already in place, the 3 assistants working efficiently in the outer room. You planned all this? In 1 week, I confirmed. Imagine what I could have done with more time. As he reached the door, I called out, Ethan, that cognitive decline narrative you and Dylan created. He turned. How's that working out for you now? The door closed behind him with a satisfying click. Outside, Kelly knocked and entered with a champagne bottle and 2 glasses. The Pemberton transfer just cleared, she announced. That makes 73 clients officially moved over. We're at $212 million in managed assets. We clinked glasses, watching the sunset paint the harbor gold. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Westlake and Rowe announces emergency board meeting as assets hemorrhage. The dead weight had been cut loose. All right. They just hadn't realized they were the ones drowning. Tuesday morning brought the full collapse. Dylan Mercer had vanished completely. His apartment was empty, his phone disconnected, even his LinkedIn profile deleted. The London job story was fiction. He'd simply run. Kelly's sources reported that he'd tried to withdraw his last paycheck in person at 5 a.m. Monday, before the emails hit. But security had already been alerted to detain him for the missing client files he'd stolen over the weekend. They found 3 boxes of proprietary documents in his car, Kelly reported, scrolling through her phone. He was trying to take client lists to start his own firm. With what clients? I asked, reviewing the morning's transfers. They're all here now. The real spectacle was Ethan's implosion. The New York State Bar had opened a formal investigation by 10 a.m. His firm, Lambert and Associates, had suspended him pending review. Madeline, in a desperate attempt to save herself, had provided Westlake and Rowe's legal department with every text, every email, every photographed receipt from their affair, all of which implicated Ethan in the billing fraud. She threw him under the bus completely, Sandra announced, reading from her contact's message. Claims he manipulated her, that she was just a naive young woman swept up by a powerful older man. Dylan's cousin seems to have learned the family trait of self-preservation. I observed. At noon, William Westlake himself appeared in my office. No announcement, no appointment. Security just let him up, probably out of habit. He looked haggard, his usual commanding presence reduced to something almost pitiable. 212 million, he said without preamble. That's what you've taken. That's what followed me, I corrected. There's a difference. The board is talking about dissolution. 40 years of building this firm, and it might not survive the week. You let Dylan destroy 20 years of my career for his convenience. Why should I care about your 40? He sat down heavily. We made a mistake. The board sees that now. What would it take for you to come back? I couldn't help but laugh. Come back? To what? The same partners who stood by while Dylan called me dead weight? The same HR department that documented false complaints about my difficult personality? The same firm that was preparing to support my husband's claim that I was mentally declining? We didn't know about that. Stop. I pulled out the printed email from 2 months ago, where William personally approved Dylan's transition strategy. You knew. You all knew. You just didn't care. He read it, his face growing paler. This was taken out of context. No. Bill. For once, everything is perfectly in context. You thought I'd fade away quietly. Maybe take a few small clients to keep myself busy in retirement. You never imagined I'd take them all. The firm will sue, non-competes, client solicitation. Try it, I said, sliding a folder across the desk. My lawyer has already prepared our countersuit: wrongful termination, age discrimination, conspiracy to commit fraud, defamation. We have recordings. Bill. Dylan was surprisingly chatty when he thought he'd won. William opened the folder, scanning the first few pages. His hands started shaking. The recording from the January board meeting is particularly damaging, I noted. Where you joke about putting the old mare out to pasture. Your exact words, I believe. What do you want? Nothing. I have everything I want. My clients, my reputation, my freedom from toxic partners and backstabbing colleagues. There must be something. Actually, there is one thing. I stood, walking to the window. I want you to feel what I felt. That moment when you realize everyone you trusted has betrayed you. When you understand that your life's work is being stripped away not because you failed, but because someone younger, cheaper, and more politically connected wanted your spot. That's cruel. That's business. Isn't that what Dylan said? Sometimes you have to cut away the dead weight. William stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Claire, you were the best advisor we ever had. I know, I replied. That's why they had to force me out. I made them all look mediocre by comparison. After he left, Kelly brought in the afternoon mail. Among the usual documents was a handwritten letter from Dylan, postmarked from JFK Airport. Claire, you win. I underestimated you. The classic mistake of assuming experience equals obsolescence. Madeline was never supposed to be part of this. She and Ethan found each other on their own. I just used it as leverage. I'm starting over in Singapore, where nobody knows this story. Yet, you should know the board was planning to force you out regardless. I was just their convenient weapon. But you probably figured that out. Congratulations on the new firm. D. M. I fed the letter into the shredder, watching it turn into confetti. Outside, I could see the Westlake and Row building. The usually bright logo light had been turned off, a sign of corporate distress that everyone on Wall Street would recognize. By market close, 3 more partners had announced their departure from Westlake and Row. The firm's largest institutional investor had pulled out. The death spiral was accelerating. My phone rang. Richard Pemberton. Claire, I just wanted you to know, the other major clients and I have been talking. We're not just following you because of loyalty. We're following because you're the only one who saw this coming and had the courage to do something about it. That's the kind of strategic thinking we want managing our assets. Thank you, Richard. Also, Ethan's firm just announced his termination. Thought you'd want to know. I hung up and looked around my office, my real office, not the one they'd let me occupy. Tomorrow. 3 more assistants from Westlake and Row would start here. By month's end, I'd have a full team. All people who'd been overlooked, undervalued, or dismissed as dead weight. The sun was setting, painting the harbor in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere, Dylan was boarding a plane to Singapore. Ethan was packing his things from our apartment. Madeline was probably updating her resume. And Westlake and Row was hemorrhaging talent and capital by the hour. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to karma, then got back to work. After all, I had an empire to build from the ashes of theirs. By Friday, the financial press had nicknamed it the Westlake Massacre. The firm that had stood for 40 years was gone. Not technically bankrupt, but gutted beyond recognition. They'd merge with a competitor by month's end. The Westlake name erased from the building, from business cards, from Wall Street's memory. William Westlake announced his retirement in a 2-line statement. No golden parachute, no celebration, just an old man leaving a pile of corporate wreckage. I sat in my office, watching the movers strip the Westlake and Row logo from their building across the street. Kelly brought in the final numbers. $317 million in managed assets, 92% of my original client base, and 14 new clients who'd heard about the exodus and wanted in. We need more space already, she said, gesturing to the outer office where 8 former Westlake employees now worked. The suite next door is available. Lease it, I said without hesitation. And the one after that? We're going to need them. My lawyer called with the final divorce decree. Ethan had agreed to everything. I kept the apartment, the investments, even the house in the Hamptons he'd bought before meeting Madeline. He kept his clothes and his ruined reputation. The Bar Association would announce his disbarment on Monday. Fastest divorce I've ever handled, the lawyer said. He didn't fight a single point. Hard to fight when you've already lost everything. That afternoon, an unexpected visitor arrived, Madeline Carter, looking nothing like the confident young woman who'd been sneaking around with my husband. Her designer clothes were replaced with a simple black suit, her face pale and drawn. Security shouldn't have let you up, I said. I told them I had documents you needed to see. She placed an envelope on my desk. Dylan's real plan. I found it in his apartment before he ran. I thought you should know the truth. Inside was a presentation dated 6 months ago, before Madeline, before Ethan's involvement. Operation Sunset, restructuring wealth management through strategic retirement. My photo was on slide 3 with a red X through it. He planned everything, Madeline said quietly. Finding out about Ethan and me was just lucky timing he exploited. We were idiots who gave him ammunition. Why show me this now? Because I lost everything too. My job, my reputation, the man I thought loved me. I'm 28 and completely destroyed professionally. She met my eyes. You won. I just wanted you to know that Dylan was always the real enemy, Ethan and I were just collateral damage he was willing to accept. I studied her for a moment, this young woman who'd helped destroy my marriage, who'd been so confident in those purple ink letters. "You're right. You're finished on Wall Street," I said. She flinched. "But you're also 28. That's young enough to start over. Maybe in another industry, another city. Learn from this. Don't be someone else's weapon again." She nodded and left without another word. I kept the presentation, adding it to my collection of evidence. Not that I needed it anymore, but some trophies are worth keeping. The day ended with champagne on the terrace, my new team toasting to our first week. Sandra had landed 3 new accounts. Kelly had poached 2 more analysts from Westlake's ruins. The future stretched ahead, bright and entirely ours. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown international number. "Dylan, probably. Saw the news. Westlake and Rowe is gone. You didn't just win, you salted the earth. I'm almost impressed." Almost. I deleted it without responding. He wasn't worth the typed words. As the sun set over New York, painting the sky in shades of triumph, I thought about that retirement party 1 week ago. Dylan standing there, calling me dead weight, everyone laughing. Ethan watching with satisfaction as his wife was humiliated. They'd all believed I would shuffle away quietly, grateful for whatever scraps they threw me. They'd believed 20 years of relationship building meant nothing compared to an MBA and the right connections. They'd believed experience was weakness, that loyalty was outdated, that trust could be manufactured overnight. They'd believed wrong. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the week, the anger, the hurt, the exhausting effort of destroying those who'd tried to destroy me, but also the satisfaction. God. The satisfaction of watching every single one of them lose everything they'd thought they'd stolen from me. My phone rang. "Richard Pemberton." "Claire, I just wanted to say, the presentation you gave today was brilliant. You've got everyone excited about the new strategies." "Thank you, Richard. I promised you'd never regret following me." "I know. That's why we all came. You keep your promises." He paused. "Oh, and Claire? Best retirement party ever. The real one, I mean. The one where you burned it all down." I laughed, really laughed. For the first time in weeks, Monday would bring new challenges, new clients, new mountains to climb. But tonight, in my office overlooking the harbor, with the Westlake and Rowe building dark across the street, I raised my champagne glass to the window. "To dead weight," I whispered, then drained the glass. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's making sure everyone who doubted you has a front row seat to watch you fly while they sink. And I was soaring now, higher than they'd ever imagined possible, powered by the very experience they'd dismissed as obsolete. The old ways, relationships, trust, loyalty, had won. And everyone on Wall Street would remember it. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet revenge and justice served cold. Where are you tuning in from today? I'd love to know in the comments below. Let's connect and share our thoughts on Claire's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, please subscribe to the channel and let me know what you think. Did Claire go too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Share your thoughts below.